By now, everyone's heard that Joe Biden won the Electoral College voting for today. Of course, getting the 306 votes to Donald Trump's votes to become the 46th president. We all know that Donald Trump is going to get steamed over this. He's going to be angry at this, and he's going to be whatever. It's time for us to move on at this point. But after Saturday, after seeing the marches by Donald Trump supporters, hearing about arrests being made from the Proud Boys and Black Lives Matter protesters that have resulted in assaults and stabbings, I don't think we're going to get through this thing without radically changing everything about the political landscape. The fact is, it's not going to be an overnight process even after Donald Trump leaves. Right now, we just heard that Donald Trump is forcing to resign. You might as well just say fire. He's resigning the Attorney General, Billy Barr. We all know why he's doing it, because Barr didn't. The one person in the law that did protect him isn't protecting him anymore, because he can't anymore. Anyway, the next video you're going to see here, I actually recorded this a few days ago, and I meant to publish it here on YouTube a long time ago, but honestly, it feels more appropriate now that I post it here and now at the end of the Electoral College vote, and hopefully the end of the Donald Trump nightmare, than this. So bear with me when you hear the recording of this. I found this article online from the Atlantic magazine called "A Political Obituary for Donald Trump. The effects of his reign will linger, but democracy survived." It's going to be a long one, so just try to bear with me on this. It was published on December 9th by George Packer. Quoting, "To assess the legacy of Donald Trump's presidency, start by qualifying it. Since last February, more than 250,000 Americans have died from the COVID-19 virus, a fifth of the world's deaths from the disease, the highest number of any country. In the 3 years before the pandemic, 2.3 million Americans lost their health insurance, accounting for 10,000 excess deaths. Millions more lost their coverage during the pandemic. The United States score on the Human Rights Organization's Freedom House Annual Index dropped from 90 of 100 under President Barack Obama to 86 under Trump, below that of Greece and Honduras. I'm not sure if I said that right. Trump withdrew the United States from 13 international organizations, agreements, and treaties. The number of refugees admitted into the country fell from 85,000 to 12,000. About 400 miles of barrier were built along the southern border, and the whereabouts of 666 children seized at the border by United States officials remains unknown. America under Trump has become less free, less equal, more divided, more alone, deeper in debt, swampier, dirtier, meaner, sicker, and deader. Trump reversed 80 environmental rules and regulations. He appointed 220 judges to the federal bench, including 3 to the Supreme Court, 24% female, 4% black, and 100% conservative, with more red not qualified by the American Bar Association than under any other president in the past half century. The national debt increased by $6 trillion, or 37%. In Trump's last year, the trade deficit was on track to exceed $600 billion, the largest trading gap since 2008. Trump signed just one major piece of legislation, the 2017 tax law, which, according to one study, for the first time brought the total tax rate to of the wealthiest 400 Americans below that of every other incoming group. In Trump's first year as president, he paid $750 in taxes. Let me repeat that. Just $750 in taxes. While he was in office, taxpayers and campaign donors handed over at least $8 million to his family businesses. No number from Trump's years in power will ever be more or lastingly destructive than his 25,000 false or misleading statements. Super spread by social media and cable news, they contaminated the minds of tens of millions of people. Trump's lies will linger for years, poisoning the atmosphere like radioactive dust. Now, presidents lie routinely about everything from war to sex to their health. When the lies are consequential enough, they have a corrosive effect on democracy. Lyndon B. Johnson deceived Americans about the Gulf of Tonkin incident and everything else concerning the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon's lifelong habit of persevering gave him the nickname Tricky Dick Nixon. After Vietnam and Watergate, Americans never fully recovered in their trust in government. But these cases of presidential lying came from a time when the purpose was limited and rational to cover up a scandal, to make disasters disappear, to mislead the public in service of the particular goal. In a sense, Americans expected a degree of fabrication from their leaders. After Jimmy Carter, in his '76 campaign, promised, "I'll never tell you a lie," and then pretty much kept his word, voters sent him back to Georgia. Ronald Reagan's gonzy fictions were far more popular. Trump's lies were different. They belonged to the postmodern era. They were assaults against not this or that fact, but reality itself. They spread beyond public policy to invade private life, clouding the mental faculties of everyone who had to breathe his air, dissolving the very distinction between truth and falsehood. Their purpose was never the conventional desire to conceal something shameful from the public. His was stunningly forthright about the things that other presidents would have gone to great lengths to keep secret. His true feelings about the late Senator John McCain and other war heroes. His eagerness to get rid of disloyal underlings. His desire for law enforcement to protect his friends and hurt his enemies. His efforts to extort a foreign leader for dirt on a political adversary. His affection for Kim Jong-un and admiration for Vladimir Putin. His positive view of white nationalists. His hostility towards racial and religious minorities. And his contempt for women. The most malicious of Trump's predecessors would have been more careful to limit those thoughts to private recording systems. Trump spoke them openly, not because he couldn't control his impulses, but intentionally and initially, even systematically, in order to demolish the norms that would otherwise constrain his power. To his supporters, his shamelessness became a badge of honesty and strength. They grasped the message that they too could say whatever they want without apology. To his opponents, fighting by the rules, even in a small way, calling him President Trump, seemed like a sucker's game. So the level of American political language was everywhere, dragged down, leading to a gaping shame deficit. Trump's barrage of falsehoods, as many as 50 daily in the last few fevered months of the 2020 campaign, compelled by his unconcealed brutality. Lying was another variety of shamelessness. Just as he said aloud what he was supposed to keep to himself, he lied again and again about matters of self-fact. The more brazen and frequent the lie, the better. 2 days after the polls closed, with the returns showing him almost certain to lose, Trump stood at the White House podium and declared himself the winner of an election that his opponent was trying to steal. This crowning conspiracy theory of Trump's presidency activated his entitled children, complicated staff, and sycophants in Congress and the media to issue dozens of statements declaring that the election was fraudulent. Following the mechanism of every big lie of the Trump years, the Republican Party establishment fell in line. Within a week of Election Day, false claims of voter fraud in swing states have received almost 5 million mentions in the press and on social media. In one poll, 70% of Republicans concluded that the election had been free or fair. So a stab in the back narrative was buried in the minds of Americans, where it burns away as incomprehensible as carbon isotope, consuming what is left of their trust in democratic institutions and values. The narrative will widen the gap between Trump believers and their compatriots who might live in the same town, but in a different universe. And that's what Trump's purpose, to keep us locked in a mental prison where reality was unknowable so that he could go on wielding power, whether in office or out of office, including the power to destroy. For his opponents, the lies were intended to be profoundly demoralizing. Neither counting on them for checking facts or debunking conspiracies made any difference. Trump demonstrated again and again that the truth doesn't matter. In rational people, this provoked insecurity, outrage, exhaustion, and finally, an impulse to crawl away and abandon the field of politics to the fanatics. For believers, the consequences were way worse. They surrendered the ability to make basic judgments about the facts, exiling themselves from the common framework of self-government. They became literally swirling the wind in the preposterous claim that blew from Donald Trump's Twitter page. Truth was whatever the world held whole again by hurting their enemies. The more far-fetched, the more poignant and thrilling. After the election, as charges of voter fraud began to pile up, Matthew Sheffield, a reformed right-wing media activist, tweeted, and I quote, "Truth for the conservative journalist is anything that harms the left. It doesn't have to be a fact. Trump's numerous lies about any subject under the sun are thus justified because in his descriptions, the descriptions point to a larger truth, that liberals are evil." How did half of the country, practically hands-on, self-reliant Americans, still balancing family budgets and following complex repair manuals, slip into such conjunctive decline when it came to politics? Blaming ignorance or stupidity would be a mistake. You have to summon an act of will, a certain energy and imagination to place the truth with the authority of a calm man like Donald Trump. Hannah Audit, in The Origins of Totalitarianism, describes the scrupulosity to propaganda of the autonomized modern masses, and I quote, "Obsessed by a desire to escape from reality, because they're in essential homelessness, they can no longer bear its accidental, incomprehensible aspects," unquote. They seek refuge in the man-made pattern a relative consistency that bears little relation to reality. Though the United States is still a democratic republic, it is not a totalitarian regime, and Trump was an all-American demagogue, not a fascist dictator. His followers abandoned common sense and found their guide to the world in him. Defeat won't change that. Trump damaged the rest of us too. He got as far as he did by appealing to the premature hostility of popular masses towards elites. In democracy, who gets to say what is true? The experts or the people? The historian Sophia Rosenfeld, author of Democracy and Truth, traces this conflict back to the Enlightenment, when modern democracy overthrew the authority of kings and priests. And I quote, the ideal of democratic truth processes has been threatened repeatedly ever since the late 18th century by the efforts of one or the other of these epistemic cohorts, expert or popular, to monopolize it. Monopoly of public policy by experts, trade negotiators, government bureaucrats, think tankers, professors, journalists, helped create the populist backlash that empowered Trump. His reign of lies drove educated Americans to place their faith and even their identity, all the more certainty in certain experts who didn't always deserve it. Now, those experts being the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and election posters. The war between the populists and experts revealed both sides of the democratic imperative to persuade. The standoff turned them into caricatures. Trump's legacy includes an extremist Republican Party that tries to hold on to power by frequently undemocratic means, and the opposition push towards its own version of extremism. He leaves behind a society in which the bounds of trust are degraded, in which his example licenses everyone to cheat on taxes and to mock affliction. Many of his policies can be reversed or mitigated. It will be much harder to clear our minds of his lies and restore the shared understanding of reality. The agreement, however, inconvenient, that A is A and not B, on which democracy depends on. But now we have the chance, because in two events in Trump's last year in office broke the spell of a sinister perversion of the truth. The first, obviously, was the coronavirus pandemic. The beginning of the end of Trump's presidency arrived in this country on March 11, 2020, when he addressed the nation for the first time on the subject of this pandemic and showed himself to be completely out of his depth. The virus was a fact that Trump couldn't lie into oblivion or forge into a political weapon. It was too personal and frightening and too real. As hundreds of thousands of Americans have died, many of them needlessly, and the administration feigned between fantasy and partisan entitlement and criminal negligence, a critical number of Americans realized that Trump's lies could get someone they loved killed. The second event obviously came on November the 3rd. For months, Trump had tried frantically to destroy Americans' trust in the election, the essence of the democratic system, the one lever of power that belongs undeniably to the people. His efforts consisted of non-stop lies about the fraudulence of mail-in ballots, but the ballots flooded into the election offices and the people lined up before dawn on the first day of early voting in many states, and some of them in many states waited 10 hours to vote. And by the end of the election day, despite soaring threats of the virus, more than 150 million American citizens had cast their ballots, the highest turnout since at least 1900. The defeated president tried again to soil our faith by taking away our votes. The election doesn't end his lies. Nothing will. Or the deeper conflicts that lies relevant. But we learned that we still want democracy. This too is the legacy of Donald John Trump. Thank you all for listening. CTP, know the truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.